Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we journey far from the familiar to a place where history whispers through the sands and ancient empires still cast long shadows across time. Imagine a land where gold once flowed like water, where caravans stretched to the horizon, laden with salt more precious than jewels. Imagine a realm where kings walked on carpets of gold and libraries held treasures beyond measure. This is Africa, not just a continent, but a tapestry of stories, vibrant, complex, and endlessly fascinating. And at its heart, a golden empire rises from the dust, its wealth so vast it would shake the foundations of the known world. Not a myth, not a legend, but history, written in gold and salt. Tonight, we walk these ancient paths. We begin by following the grueling journey of the trans-Saharan salt traders, men who risked everything to cross a merciless desert, their lives hanging by a thread of thirst and determination. Then we ascend to the heights of power with Mansa Musa, the man whose pilgrimage to Mecca was so lavish it caused an economic crisis in every land he passed. From there, we'll explore the bustling streets of Timbuktu, not just a city, but a beacon of learning that drew scholars from across the world to its hallowed libraries. And finally, we will uncover the legacy of Mali, an empire whose influence stretched far beyond its borders, shaping the course of African and world history. So, lean in close, let the modern world fade away, and join me by the flickering light of history as the echoes of empire resound through time, and the epic tale of Africa's golden age begins to unfold. Picture, if you will, a line of men and camels stretching across an endless sea of sand. The sun beats down mercilessly, mirages shimmering on the horizon. These are the salt traders, the lifeblood of empires, embarking on a journey that will test the very limits of human endurance. Their path is one of brutal simplicity, from the salt mines of Tagaza to the markets of Timbuktu. But simplicity does not mean ease. Each step is a battle against the elements, against exhaustion, against the ever-present spectre of death that haunts these barren lands. Water is more precious than the salt they carry. Food is a luxury afforded only when absolutely necessary. The traders marched from dawn to dusk, their skin blistered by the sun, their throats parched, their minds focused on a single goal: survival. But why endure such hardship? The answer lies in the white gold they transport. In an age before refrigeration, salt was the key to preserving food, to sustaining life itself. Empires rose and fell on the control of salt routes. A successful journey could make a man wealthy beyond his dreams. If he survived, now let us shift our gaze from these hardy traders to a figure of almost mythical proportions. Mansa Musa, ruler of Mali, said to be the richest man who ever lived. In the year 1324, Mansa Musa embarked on a pilgrimage to Mecca that would become the stuff of legend. His caravan stretched as far as the eye could see. 60,000 men, 12,000 slaves, 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold. As he traveled, Mansa Musa distributed gold with such abandon that he single-handedly caused inflation in every city he passed through. In Cairo, the value of gold plummeted, and the economy took years to recover. But this journey was more than a display of wealth. It was a statement to the world. Mali was a power to be reckoned with. Its ruler, a man of unimaginable riches and piety. Upon his return, Mansa Musa brought back architects and scholars, setting in motion a golden age of learning and culture. Which brings us to our next stop, Timbuktu. Timbuktu, the very name conjures images of a place remote and mysterious. But in the 14th century, it was a beacon of knowledge, a center of learning that rivaled any in the world. Here, in the heart of Africa, great libraries housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Scholars debated philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics. The University of Sankara attracted students from across the Muslim world, but Timbuktu was more than just a city of learning. It was a crucial hub in the trans-Saharan trade, where salt from the north met gold from the south. Its wealth and reputation grew in equal measure, making it a jewel in the crown of the Mali Empire. And what an empire it was! At its height, Mali controlled an area larger than all of Western Europe, stretching from the Atlantic coast deep into the Sahara. Its wealth in gold and salt made it a major player on the world stage. The legacy of Mali and its most famous ruler, Mansa Musa, would echo through the centuries. Tales of African gold would inspire explorers and conquerors for generations to come. The intellectual heritage of Timbuktu would preserve knowledge that might otherwise have been lost to time. As our journey through this golden age comes to an end, we are left with a profound sense of the richness and complexity of African history. From the salt traders braving the desert to the scholars of Timbuktu, from the gold mines of Bambouk, we have witnessed an era of greatness, often overlooked in the grand narrative of world history. So as we return to the present, let us carry with us the weight of this legacy. Let us remember that Africa's story is not one of simplicity or darkness, but of light, of learning, of empires that rose and fell like the dunes of the Sahara. For in understanding this history, we gain not just knowledge of the past, but insight into the tapestry of human experience. In all its glory, its struggle, and its enduring spirit, there is a rhythm to the empire, not the rhythm of drums or dance, but the slow, aching rhythm of footsteps. Dot, 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 and go. In the courts of Mali, every day unfolds like the one before, predictable, opulent, and without variation. But within this repetition lies power, structure, in the face of chaos, ritual, in the face of change. Let us begin, dot, 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 at dawn. A muezzin calls the first word, Allahu Akbar, God is greatest. A simple call to prayer. The sky still a deep indigo, stars retreating quietly behind the curtain of approaching light. The courtiers do not speak, not yet. Words are saved here like gold dust. Only the rustle of silk robes, the soft padding of bare feet on marble, and the gentle clink of golden bracelets as they prepare for the day. The palace servants move silently, each golden plate secured with care, some already gleaming with the first rays of sunlight streaming through ornate windows. Before the day begins, there is a ritual. The youngest prince in the court pours a tiny amount of perfumed water onto the floor. An offering, perhaps, or a reminder, a gesture to the empire. We know our place here. Let's pause here. The incense burns gently, and the sky begins to blush. The court, the royal procession begins its march. There are no greetings, no songs, only the soft swish of robes and the measured tread of sandaled feet. Mansa Musa walks with his head held high, not from pride, but from duty. The weight of the empire rests upon his shoulders, invisible yet heavier than any golden crown. By midday, the heat is stifling. Even the courtiers grow quiet. Brows glisten, fans flutter, eyes narrow in concentration, protected beneath thick veils of protocol and etiquette. You do not look back, not because you are afraid, but because there is nothing behind but history and the long gilded footsteps of those who ruled before, and still you rule. Decisions wait, gold burdens, but you lead. One decree, then another. Let's pause again. The heat quiets, dot, 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 and even the courtiers seem to sigh. The gold itself, gold is strange. To those who see it in distant lands, it is a wonder, a treasure, but to those who wield it. It is a responsibility. The coins weigh heavy in your purse if carried too long. They tarnish your hands if touched too often. They flavor your decisions. Whether you want them to or not, you cannot escape it. Gold is in the walls, in the clothes, in the very air of the court. By the second week of your reign, your dreams are lined with it. Tiny worries glitter like nuggets. Your tongue feels heavy, no longer able to speak simple truths. Some advisors stop offering counsel altogether, not out of fear, but from ale. Their minds are too dazzled to argue. Gold is also fickle. Spend too much, and it loses value. Hoard it, and you must explain yourself. Each coin is counted, weighed against the needs of the empire. Your worth is tied to its wise use, so you rule more carefully. Let's pause here again. The incense is now low, and your heartbeat slows to match the pace of diplomacy. Evening in the palace, when the sun finally dips, the court retires. There is no rest, only a chosen chamber where the burdens are less visible. The crown is removed slowly, each jewel glinting as if reluctant to leave your brow. Then, and only then, do you speak freely. Short sentences, dry laughter, a shared joke about whose turban was most outrageous today. Laughter feels like rebellion, like something stolen back from the weight of rule. Dinner is lavish, spiced meats cooked with exotic herbs, sometimes a rare fruit if a caravan has arrived. No simplicity, all ceremony, just power, met with whatever the empire can provide. Then prayers, face turned to Mecca. Gold dust on the prayer mat, wealth in every gesture. The palace is a holy place, not because it is sacred, but because it humbles you into silence. Some courtiers sleep immediately, others lie awake, counting their blessings, wondering if anyone outside the walls remembers their true name. Let's pause here. The stars above turn slowly, like the wheels of an ancient empire. The cost some will not survive. Every reign loses allies, sometimes to intrigue, sometimes to ambition, sometimes to rivals. Pale shadows that slip from neighboring kingdoms and vanish again before alliances can be forged. But most often, it is the quiet ones, the ones who bow a little lower, agree a little quicker, forget to question when commanded. One morning, they do not rise to their station, and the others do not weep, because power ... always takes something in return. They bury the legacy in shallow praise, mark it with a single monument, then rule on. No songs, no laments, just decrees, because the empire must still thrive. The trade must go on. Let's pause now. The night deepens, and even ambition rests for a while. And still they rule. Why? Why bear the weight of an empire, day after day? The answer is complex, because life beyond Molly's borders is harsher still. Because cities need gold to prosper, because subjects wait. Not for miracles, but for justice, for progress, for a future, and because in this opulence, in this ritual, there is purpose. There is a strange kind of peace that comes from ruling, from knowing the throne never changes, from surrendering your will to the rhythm of the empire, even when your mind races, even when the gold blinds. You rule, because ruling is all there is. Let's pause here once more. The incense fades softly, and the palace whispers your legacy. No return. The empire of Molly stretches vast, like a tapestry woven of gold and sand. Each thread a life, each knot a city, held together by the hands of Mansa Musa. In the heart of Timbuktu, knowledge blooms. Libraries filled with wisdom from distant lands. Scholars debate beneath the shade of ancient walls. their words echoing through time like grains of sand. The weight of gold, both blessing and curse, flows through the veins of this African giant. Caravans stretch across the Sahara, carrying wealth, stories, and dreams of distant shores. But power, like the desert wind, shifts, eroding even the mightiest of thrones. Mansa Musa's reign, a golden age, will one day be but whispers in the dunes. Yet for now, the empire stands proud, a beacon of culture, faith, and might. In the courts of Mali, history is written with every sunrise, every starlit night. So let us end our tale here, as the moon rises over Timbuktu's spires. The empire sleeps, but never truly rests, for tomorrow brings new challenges, new fires. In the rhythm of Mali's heartbeat, we find the pulse of Africa's soul, a legacy etched in golden wisdom, a story that will never grow old. The Sahara has no walls, no locked doors, no prison cells, but still, it holds men captive, not with chains, but with silence, not with guards, but with the invisible weight of tradition and necessity. And yet, even in this vast, unforgiving sea of sand, men have whispered "Doe." Not loudly, not with fists, but with their feet, by refusing to take another step. This is the story of the earliest desert strikes, unrecorded in royal ledgers, unrecognized by the merchants in their robes of fine cotton, but remembered quietly by those who carried the salt. Let us begin. Let's pause here. The wind hushes, as though waiting for the tale to begin. It is said that in the late 13th century, during a particularly long haul from Tagaza to Timbuktu, a caravan of 200 men stopped. Not because of a sandstorm, not because a camel had broken its leg, but because they simply could not bear another day. Their rations had been halved. A merchant, eager to preserve profit, had underpacked millet and water. Instead, he promised prayers and blessings. But prayers do not fill the stomach. Blessings cannot mend cracked souls or blistered backs. And so, the men stopped. They laid down their ropes, let the camels wander. They sat in silence, in the heat, not out of rage, but out of quiet desperation. For 2 days, the caravan did not move. The salt sat in the sand like the bones of a fallen beast. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and the memory of rebellion stirs like smoke. This act, simple as it was, shook the merchants. They had grown used to obedience. 2 quiet shoulders, bent under weight. 2 men who never said no. But stillness has power. In the desert, where movement is life, stopping is a threat. If the salt didn't arrive on time, trade would suffer. If word got out, other caravans might follow. And so the merchant came, his voice soft, then sharp, promising silver, then threatening violence. But the men would not move. They sat in the sand, staring at the horizon. The merchant left and returned the next day with extra food, more water, and fewer words. It was not a victory. There were no songs, no flag was raised, but the caravan walked again, this time with full bellies and fewer burdens. And in that silence was the seed of resistance. Let's pause again. The stars begin to shift above, marking the passage of quiet revolutions. Word travels differently in the desert. There are no messengers, no letters, only stories, carried by the wind, or the firelight, or the lips of a tired. And so this small act of defiance spread from Tagaza to from Bilma to Wallata. No names, just a tale of men who sat down, of camels who rested, of salt that waited, It gave others courage. Soon, a pattern began to emerge. When water ran low, the march slowed. When pay was withheld, tools were dropped. When a man died, his brothers would halt, insisting on burial rites, real ones, with prayers and songs. These were not strikes as we know them. There were no picket lines, no banners, just the refusal to suffer in silence. Let's rest here. The night deepens, and the air grows still, just as it did before those quiet acts of resistance. In this cruel terrain, survival is not just a personal struggle. It's a shared one. A man alone in the Sahara is already dead. But a group, a caravan, has a chance. And so bonds were formed, not written in ink or oath, but in calloused hands that helped bind a wounded foot. In a crust of bread shared during famine, in the silence of a companion who simply walks beside you day after day. This brotherhood was not forged in joy, but in pain, and slowly, it became a shield. Merchants learned not to push too hard. A beating here, a theft there, and the march would slow. Perhaps a camel would wander off. Perhaps salt would mysteriously break and become unsellable. Sabotage wore a patient face. Resistance became part of the rhythm. Not loud, but steady, like footsteps. Let's pause again. The fire flickers, and the bonds between men glow warmly in its light. Some stories survive only in whispers, like the old tale of Alezan, a caravan worker who once threw his rope down and walked not back home, but to the side of the trail, where he built a tiny cairn of stones, each one a prayer for the man who had died the day before. Left unburied, the merchant had refused a burial. Salt was more important than soul, but Alezan did not agree. He stopped, built the cairn, whispered a prayer, and then, quietly, every man behind him did the same. One by one, each worker paused, bent, added a stone. It took hours. The sun climbed high. The salt baked in the sun, but they did not care. The merchant watched, silent, furious, powerless. It is said that this small pile of stone still stands somewhere between Arawan and Timbuktu, though buried now beneath shifting sands. Let's pause now. The memory of quiet courage lingers gently in the air. Today. No songs are sung for these men, no monuments, no golden statues, but in the desert wind, you might still hear them. A footstep, a low chant carried across time. They remind us that resistance does not always roar. Sometimes it sighs, sometimes it waits, and sometimes it simply refuses to move. So the salt continued its journey. But now it traveled not just with weight, but with meaning. Let's pause here for the final time in this chapter. The sand settles. The sky turns to ink. And the quiet power of those forgotten men surrounds us like a blanket. In the time of Mansa Musa, when gold flowed like water and Mali's empire stretched across the sands, the salt trade was the lifeblood of West Africa. But beneath the glittering surface of wealth and power, there were those who carried the true weight of empire on their backs. These were the men of the salt caravans. Nameless in the grand histories, faceless in the tales of kings and conquerors, yet it was their sweat, their endurance, that made the wealth of empires possible. From the salt mines of Tagaza they would set out, 100 strong, camels laden with slabs of white gold. Their journey would take them across the harshest terrain on earth, through scorching days and freezing nights, past dunes that could swallow entire caravans, through lands where water was more precious than the salt they carried. But it was not just the desert they battled, it was the greed of merchants, the indifference of rulers. The constant push to carry more, to move faster, to endure beyond human limits. And so, in the shadow of Molly's golden age, a different kind of revolution began to stir. Not with swords or battle cries, but with silence, with stillness, with the quiet power of men who simply said, "No more." It began, perhaps, with a single man, a worker whose name is lost to time, who, one blistering afternoon, set down his load and refused to take another step, not out of laziness, not out of defiance, but out of a deep, unspoken understanding that to continue would mean death. Others joined him. First a trickle, then a flood, until the entire caravan sat, silent and immovable, in the burning sand. The merchants raged. They threatened, they pleaded, but the men did not move. For 2 days, the caravan remained frozen in time, a strange, unmoving island in the sea of sand. And then something remarkable happened. The merchants relented. Extra rations were distributed. Water skins were refilled. The burdens were lightened. It was a small victory, unsung, unrecorded in any official history, but it was a beginning. Word spread, carried on the desert wind, from oasis to oasis, from caravan to caravan. The tale of the men who had dared to stop, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. When water ran low, the pace would slow. When loads became too heavy, tools would be set aside. When a worker fell ill, the entire caravan would halt until he recovered. These were not grand gestures of rebellion. There were no speeches, no manifestos, just the quiet, stubborn insistence on being treated as men, not beasts of burden. The merchants learned, grudgingly, that pushing too hard meant losing more in the long run. That a well-rested, well-fed caravan moved faster than one driven by the lash. And so, in the vast silence of the Sahara, a new kind of power was born. The power of those who could simply refuse to move. It was a power born of necessity, of brotherhood forged in the crucible of the desert, where a man's life depended not on his individual strength, but on the bonds he formed with his fellows. These bonds were not spoken of, they were lived, in shared water skins, in hands that helped a fallen comrade to his feet, in the quiet nod of understanding between men who had faced death together. This silent solidarity became its own kind of weapon. When one man was mistreated, the entire caravan might slow to a crawl. When wages were withheld, essential tools might mysteriously break. It was resistance writ small, in 1,000 tiny acts of defiance, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pauses between steps. And yet, it changed everything. The great salt roads of West Africa, which had flowed for centuries on the backs of nameless men, began to shift, to adapt, to recognize, however grudgingly, the humanity of those who walked them. No songs were sung of these quiet rebels, no tales told around the fires of kings, but in the whispered stories passed down through generations of desert walkers, their legacy lived on. They were the men who had looked out across the endless dunes and dared to say, "We are more than this burden we carry." Their revolution was not written in blood or gold. It was etched in footsteps across the sand, in the slow, steady rhythm of men who knew their own worth. And so, as the empire of Molly rose and fell, as gold flowed and ebbed, the salt continued its journey, carried not just by the strength of men's backs, but by the power of their silent, shared resolve. In the end, it was not the gleaming wealth of Mansa Musa that truly shaped the destiny of West Africa. It was the quiet courage of those who walked the sands, who carried not just salt, but the seeds of a different kind of freedom. Their names are lost to us now. Their faces faded like mirages in the desert heat. But their spirit, the spirit of those who refuse to be broken lives on. In every worker who stands up for their rights, in every community that bands together in the face of oppression, in every quiet act of resistance against injustice. The salt roads may be silent, the caravans long gone, but the lesson they taught still echoes across the sands of time. That true power lies not in gold or empires, but in the unbreakable bonds between those who walk together, in the courage to stop when stopping seems impossible, and in the strength to keep moving even when the path ahead seems endless. This is the legacy of the Salt Walkers, the quiet revolutionaries of the Sahara. May their footsteps never be forgotten. Imagine, if you will, a morning in 1324. The Sahara is quiet. The heat has not yet risen. The air is soft as flour, and on the far edge of Mollies Empire, where the Niger River bends like a silver bracelet, hooves begin to stir the dust. It begins with one man, a man in a long, flowing bubu, gold-threaded and royal, a man whose name would echo across continents, Mansa Musa. But behind him, thousands follow. Not soldiers, not slaves, but a caravan unlike anything the world had ever seen. This is not just a journey, it is a spectacle, a sermon in silk and salt and gold. This is the beginning of a pilgrimage. Let's pause here for a moment. The wind carries anticipation and the scent of history. A mission. Mansa Musa was not the first to go to Mecca, but he would go further, with more wealth, with more vision, and with a quiet sense of something greater than himself. The Hajj pilgrimage to the holy city was required of all able Muslims, but for a ruler of Musa's stature, it was also a message, a way to say, we in West Africa are part of the world. And so preparations began. Not for days, not for weeks, but for months. They gathered gold. They planned supply chains. They assembled a caravan of 60,000 peoples, 60,000 including soldiers, scholars, and with them 80 camels, each carrying over 100 kilograms of pure gold. Let's pause here. The dust begins to rise. The footprints stretch far into the horizon. Through kingdoms and beyond, the route would take Musa across the Sahara, through desert, over rivers, and into the lands of Egypt and Arabia. But even before the borders were crossed, the caravan turned heads. Villages and towns along the way halted their markets to catch a glimpse. Children whispered about the camels with golden saddlebags. Old men compared it to the legends of Alexander or Sundiata, and Musa always composed rode near the center, not in front, but not behind either, a place of balance, as if he were both leading and listening at once. His mission was spiritual, but he knew the power of image. Wherever he stopped, he built mosques, donated gold, left scholars behind to teach. The Hajj was a riverand. Everywhere it touched, it irrigated ideas. Let's rest a while. The caravan moves on, but we remain by the fire, warmed by its story. Gold like rain. By the time Musa reached Cairo, the city trembled. Its streets were narrow and bustling, its merchants clever and curious, its scholars sharp with questions, but no one was prepared for what came next. Mansa Musa gave away gold, so much of it to the poor, to the scholars, to the mosques, to the markets, that gold lost its value. The price of everything in Cairo inflated. For 12 years, Egypt's economy felt the aftershock. Imagine that. A stranger rides in, donates generously, and the entire kingdom's currency shifts underfoot. Musa had not meant to cause harm, but he had underestimated the power of generosity. When gold becomes common, it loses its mystery. Let's pause here. Even generosity, when vast, can ripple like thunder through still water. An audience with the Sultan at the heart of Cairo sat the Mamluk Sultan. He had heard of Musa, but seeing was different. Protocol dictated that Mansa Musa bow before the Sultan. But Musa wise and he said, "I bow to none but Allah." The court gasped, but Musa explained calmly, with respect and clarity, and in time he offered tribute, not as a servant but as a brother in faith. This meeting, delicate and full of protocol, would go on to inspire countless stories. A king from West Africa, clothed in gold, standing tall in a foreign court, not conquered, not begging but sharing. Let's rest a little longer. The fire is low, and our minds drift across borders, following footsteps of gold. The purpose behind it all, it's easy to mistake Musa's pilgrimage as a show of wealth, but it was also a quest. He brought architects, he hired scholars, he invited poets, astronomers, and jurists to return with him to Mali. He was building more than palaces, he was planting the seeds of an intellectual empire. After Mecca, the return journey began. Harder, slower, but with new ideas, new maps, new dreams. Among his recruits would be Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, an architect whose work would inspire future designs in Timbuktu. So the sands swallowed their footprints again, but what Musa brought back would change the region forever. Let's pause here. The embers glow softly, and the journey continues not in sand, but in memory. As we reflect on Mansa Musa's golden pilgrimage, we see more than just a display of wealth. We witness a vision unfolding. For Musa, this journey was about connection, connecting Mali to the wider Islamic world, connecting wealth to wisdom, connecting the present to a future he could only imagine. In the quiet moments between the spectacle, Musa listened. He learned. He absorbed the knowledge of scholars from Cairo to Mecca, and as he traveled, he left more than gold in his wake. He left inspiration, he left curiosity, he left a hunger for knowledge that would fuel Mali's golden age. Think of the conversations around campfires, the debates in desert oases, the quiet moments of prayer and reflection. Musa's caravan was not just a procession. It was a moving university, a diplomatic mission, a statement to the world, and as they turned back towards Mali, the journey was far from over. The return would be slower, more contemplative. The gold was lighter, but the minds were heavier with new ideas. Musa had seen the great libraries of Cairo. He had prayed in the holiest sites of Islam. He had exchanged ideas with scholars from across the known world. And now, he dreamed of bringing that light back to Mali. Imagine the excitement as word spread of the caravan's return. Villagers preparing feasts, scholars readying their questions, a kingdom holding its breath, waiting to see how it had been changed. For Musa knew that true wealth was not in gold, but in knowledge, in culture, in the minds of his people. As the Niger River came into view once more, Musa must have felt the weight of his journey, not just in miles traveled, but in the responsibility he now carried. He had seen the world, and now he would bring the world to Mali. Let us pause here one last time. The journey of 1,000 miles has ended, but the journey of a civilization is just beginning. In the years to come, Timbuktu would rise as a center of learning. Mali's influence would spread far beyond its borders, and the echoes of Musa's golden pilgrimage would resonate through history. For, in the end, it was not the gold that made Mansa Musa's journey legendary. It was the seeds of knowledge he planted, the bridges he built between cultures, the vision of a West African empire connected to the wider world. As the dust settles and the last camel kneels, we are left with a question. What journeys await us? What bridges can we build? What knowledge can we share that will echo through the ages? For in every step we take, in every idea we exchange, we follow in the footsteps of Mansa Musa, not with gold, perhaps, but with the same spirit of curiosity, generosity, and vision that turned a pilgrimage into legend. And so, as the stars wheel overhead and the fire dies down, we end our tale. But the story of Mansa Musa, of Mali, of the endless quest for knowledge and connection, that story lives on, in every book opened, in every journey taken, in every act of generosity that ripples through the world. May we all find such purpose in our pilgrimages, great and small. Let us return now to the golden echoes of Cairo. The city still rings with the footsteps of Mansa Musa's caravan. Though weeks have passed, people speak of him with wonder, and unease, for something strange has begun to happen. Not in the mosques, where prayers rise as always. Not in the streets, where trade continues, but in the numbers, in the scales, in the weights and measures. Gold, the eternal standard, has begun to lose its grip. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles, and the desert wind carries the scent of uncertainty. Gold in too many hands, and Musa's generosity. Cairo was flooded with gold. He gave freely to the poor in ohms, to the merchants for supplies, to scholars and builders, to sultans and servants alike. Gold coins dropped into calloused palms, slid across polished counters, and filled the pockets of those who had never held such wealth before. But as gold became common, it began to buy less. Prices rose. Bread, once a copper's worth, now cost 5 times as much. Artisans demanded more. Builders raised their fees. Even camels cost more to rent. The economy, finely balanced like a scale, tipped under the weight of unexpected generosity. Let's rest a while. Even gold, abundant as sand, can turn bitter in the mouth. The law of unintended wealth, historians would later say, Musa caused the first recorded instance of inflation due to foreign aid. But in his time, such things had no name. Egypt's treasurers scrambled, the Sultan's court whispered of currency dilution, and foreign traders, Europeans, Persians, Berbers, all adjusted their ledgers. What had once been rare was now suspect. Is it pure? Is it local? Why so much? Why now? Gold's mystery faded. Its value, once spiritual, tied to the divine and eternal, now felt tainted by too many hands. In a single year, Cairo's gold dinar depreciated nearly 20%. It would take a dozen years for the market to recover. Let's pause here. Numbers rise and fall, but memory endures. A soft panic in the palace inside the Sultan's court. Robes rustled and brows furrowed. Al-Nasir, the Sultan of Egypt, was no stranger to court intrigue. He had seen war. He had survived revolts. But never had a visitor left behind such confusion. The Sultan had been generous in return. He gifted Musa precious textiles, ivory-tipped staffs, and scholars to accompany him home. But in private, the treasurer brought grim news. The royal mint could no longer guarantee purity. The price of basic military rations had doubled. Masons were demanding their wages in silver instead. And so, quietly, letters were sent to Alexandria, to Damascus, to traders in India. Stabilize the dinar, they read. Buy back the gold. Reissue controlled coinage. Slow the flow. But the damage had been done. Mansa Musa had passed through like a summer flood, leaving the land rich and yet drowning. Let's pause. Sometimes the loudest echoes come after the guest has gone. Musa, the unknowing catalyst, and what of Musa? He was likely unaware of the chaos he left behind. To him, he had fulfilled his duty, prayed in Mecca, paid respects in Cairo, built bridges, both literal and cultural. He may have heard rumors, but the caravan was already moving, heading westward, back toward Mali, back across sand and silence. It's possible. His griots told him stories of price shocks and panic, but Musa's gaze was already elsewhere, toward Timbuktu architects like Al-Sahili, toward books, libraries, law, and learning. Gold, to him, was not just wealth. It was fuel for civilization, for faith, for thought. Let's rest beneath the sky. The journey home is long, but filled with dreams. Aftermath, a changed world years later. When European cartographers made new maps, they did not draw Musa small. In the 1375 Catalan Atlas, he is shown seated on a throne of gold, crowned and holding a shining nugget in one hand. To the medieval world, he became a symbol of wealth beyond imagining, a black African emperor whose generosity shaped markets from the Sahara to the Mediterranean. Cairo never forgot. Its books kept the story, its merchants passed it down, its coins bore the memory in their weight. Mansa Musa had not just crossed the world, he had shifted its axis ever so slightly. Let's pause here. Maps fade and names change, but stories drift on. The winds of time carried tales across continents, whispering of a king whose wealth shook empires. In the bazaars of Cairo, merchants still speak of the day when gold lost its luster, when abundance became a burden and generosity a double-edged sword. The lessons of Musa's journey echo through centuries, a reminder that even the noblest intentions can have unforeseen consequences. As we close this chapter, let us ponder the delicate balance of economies, the power of a single act to ripple across nations. The story of Mansa Musa and Cairo's golden shock serves as a parable for all times. It speaks of the interconnectedness of our world, long before the age of global markets, of how one man's pilgrimage could reshape the fortunes of thousands. In the quiet corners of history, we find these moments when the ordinary becomes extraordinary, when wealth becomes a curse, and yet, from such upheavals, new understandings are born. Cairo learned the hard lessons of economic stability. Mali's fame spread far beyond its borders, a testament to African power and sophistication, and the world gained a legend of a king so wealthy his generosity could topple markets. As night falls on our tale, the campfires of memory burn bright. In Mali, griots sing of Musa's journey, of the gold that flowed like water. In Egypt, scholars pore over ancient texts, tracing the ripples of that fateful visit, and we, dear listeners, are left to wonder, what unseen consequences might our own actions have? How might our generosity, our ambitions, our dreams shape the world around us? For in the end, Mansa Musa's story is not just about gold or inflation or empire. It is about the profound interconnectedness of human lives, about how a gesture made in faith and kindness can transform societies, about the delicate dance between abundance and scarcity, between giving and receiving. As we journey on, let us carry this wisdom with us. Let us remember that our actions, however well-intentioned, can have far-reaching effects. That true wealth lies not in gold alone, but in the balanced scales of a just society. And that sometimes the greatest lessons come from unexpected sources, from a king who crossed the desert, bearing gifts that would change the world. So let us rest here, beneath the stars that once guided Musa's caravan. Let the sands of time settle, revealing the golden truths hidden within. For in stories like these, we find not just history, but reflections of our own world, of markets that rise and fall, of cultures that clash and blend, of humanity's endless quest for meaning and connection. As dawn breaks on a new day, we carry forward the echoes of Cairo's golden shock, a reminder that in every coin, in every exchange, in every act of generosity, we shape not just our own fortunes, but the very fabric of our shared world. And so, dear listeners, as we close this tale, let us move forward with wisdom, with care, and with the knowledge that our actions, like ripples in a pond, may travel farther than we ever dreamed. For, in the end, we are all connected by gold, by story, by the enduring bonds of our shared humanity. And so, the dust of Cairo was behind him. Mansa Musa and his long caravan, with its gilded cargo, turned westward home. The crescent moon rode high above the dunes, casting silver light on sand and silk, on camels laden with scrolls, glass and gold. They crossed the desert once more, this time as legends in motion. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The journey back through echoes, the road from Mecca to Mali, was not short. It spanned thousands of kilometers through hostile deserts, sacred oases, and crumbling towns, but the return held a different energy. No longer were they seeking something. Now they carried something home. Ideas, artisans, reputation. Among the travelers were architects from Andalusia, scholars from Cairo and Mecca, and dozens of African pilgrims now wiser, seasoned by their first taste of the wider world. They spoke of stonework, irrigation, city planning, and libraries. They debated theology under starlight. They whispered of justice, knowledge, and order. Musa listened, and what he heard was potential. Let's pause here. The wind carries wisdom, and silence is its friend. The birth of an imperial renaissance. When Musari interred Niani, the capital of Mali, he was not just a returning king. He was now a figure of near mythical stature. People came from every province to see him. His court had swelled, his treasury glowed, but what he built next would define him forever. With his returning architects, he commissioned grand mosques, not just for prayer, but for the education of generations. The most famous Jingabur Mosque in Timbuktu, built using Sudanese Ahelian mud brick styles infused with Andalusian geometric ideas. But he didn't stop with mosques. He founded madrasas, Islamic schools. He imported manuscripts, hundreds of them. He financed scholars, poets, and jurists. The result, Timbuktu, once a dusty trading town, became the intellectual capital of West Africa. Let's pause. The city grows in silence, like a story etched into sand. Timbuktu's quiet thunder in time. Timbuktu's fame reached far beyond Mali. It housed over 25,000 students. Its libraries held more books than most European cities. Subjects included law, mathematics, astronomy, poetry, medicine, history. Imagine that a world where a scholar in West Africa could debate a scholar in Cairo over the trajectory of a star, where a manuscript on algebra, written in flowing Ajami script, could cross the desert by camel and shape ideas in distant lands. It was, quite simply, a quiet thunder. Not war, but wisdom. Not conquest, but cultivation. Let's pause here for a moment. Books whisper where swords cannot speak. A legacy beyond gold. Mansa Musa did not live forever. He ruled for over 25 years, and when he passed, his son Maga succeeded him. But the world would not forget the name Musa. Maps still bore his image gold in hand. Cities he built still echoed with prayer and poetry, and scholars he funded would shape thought for generations. Yet the truest measure of his wealth was not in his caravan, but in his vision, in building a society where knowledge had value, where architecture reached for the divine, where Africa stood as a beacon, not a periphery. And though the empire of Mali would one day decline, its memory remains etched in stone. spoken in verse, preserved in manuscript, and now ... told beneath the stars. Let's rest here. History is not what we take, it's what we leave behind. Narrator, as the embers of our tale fade, we find ourselves at the crossroads of legend and legacy. Mansa Musa's journey home was more than a return, it was a rebirth. The sands that once whispered of his passing now sang of his triumph. Each step of his caravan planted seeds of knowledge, each hoofprint a promise of greatness to come. Let us linger here in the cool night air and imagine the scene. A caravan of dreams, picture the endless line of travelers stretching across the horizon like a river of silk and gold. Camels sway beneath the weight of precious cargonots, gosk, gold and jewels, but scrolls and scholars, ideas and aspirations. The air is thick with the scent of spices and the murmur of a dozen languages. Mansa Musa rides at the head, his eyes fixed on the western horizon, his mind already building the future. Behind him, a tapestry of cultures moves as one. Berber guides with weathered faces, Egyptian astronomers charting their course by the stars, Malian griots composing epic poems of the journey, merchants from distant lands, their eyes wide with wonder each night. As they make camp, the desert comes alive with the glow of fires and the hum of conversation. Stories are shared, friendships forged, and dreams take flight on the wings of possibility. Let's pause. ... The night air carries whispers of tomorrow. The transformation begins. As the caravan nears Mali, word of their approach spreads like wildfire. Villages empty as people line the roads, straining for a glimpse of their king, now a living legend. Mansa Musa's return is not just a homecoming, it's a coronation of ideas. With each step, Mali is reborn. Architects sketch plans for grand structures in the sand. Scholars debate the finer points of astronomy and mathematics. Artists envisioned new forms of beauty, blending African and Arabic styles. Traders calculate the wealth of new connections, spanning continents. The very air seems charged with potential, as if the desert itself holds its breath in anticipation. And at the center of it all, Mansa Musa walks no longer just a king, but a visionary. His eyes see beyond the present, to a future where Mali stands as a beacon of learning and culture. Let's pause. The future is born in moments of quiet resolve. The golden age dawns as Mansa Musa's caravan finally reaches Niani. The capital erupts in celebration. But this is no ordinary triumph, it's the birth of an era. The king wastes no time. His vision unfolds with the urgency of a man who has glimpsed greatness and cannot rest until it est realized. Mosques rise from the earth, their minarets reaching for the heavens. Libraries fill with precious manuscripts, their pages whispering secrets from distant lands. Schools open their doors, welcoming students eager to drink from the fountain of knowledge. And through it all, Mansa Musa moves like a force of nature, inspiring, guiding, building. His wealth is no longer measured in gold, but in the light of understanding that begins to shine across West Africa. Let's pause. Greatness grows in the fertile soil of shared dreams. Timbuktu, the jewel of the desert, of all the wonders Mansa Musa creates, none shine brighter than Timbuktu. Once a humble outpost, it transforms into a crucible of learning and culture. The Jingaba Mosque rises, its unique blend of Sudanese and Andalusian architecture, a testament to the fusion of ideas Musa has brought home. But it's more than a place of worship, it's a symbol of Mali's new identity. Around it, a city of scholars grows. Narrow streets lined with houses of learning, markets where books are traded alongside gold, and salt courtyards where students debate philosophy under the shade of ancient trees. The air hums with the sound of recitation, the scratch of pens on parchment, the passionate discourse of minds on fire with discovery. Timbuktu becomes more than a city, it becomes an idea, a beacon of what's possible when knowledge is valued above all else. Let's pause. In the silence between words, wisdom takes root. The echoes of greatness as years pass, the seeds planted by Mansa Musa's vision grow into a forest of achievement. Mali's influence spreads far beyond its borders, carried on the wings of ideas and the backs of traders. Scholars from Cairo to speak of Timbuktu with reverence. Maps show Mansa Musa holding a golden orb, a king whose wealth is measured not just in gold, but in the currency of wisdom. And though empires rise and fall, though the sands of time may shift, the legacy of this golden age endures. In the libraries of Timbuktu, in the geometric patterns of its mosques, in the stories passed down through generations, we find echoes of a time when Africa led the world in learning and culture. Mansa Musa's true wealth was not what he brought back from his pilgrimage, but what he built with it, a kingdom of the mind that would outlast any empire of gold. Let's rest here. The stars above us have seen empires rise and fall, but knowledge, once kindled, burns eternal. And so, as our tale draws to a close, we're left with the whisper of possibility, a reminder that greatness often begins with a single step, a single idea, a single vision of what could be. In the story of Mansa Musa and the Golden Age of Mali, we find not just history, but inspiration, a call to build our own legacies, to seek knowledge, to dream beyond the horizons of our time. For in the end, it is not the gold we gather, but the wisdom we share that truly enriches the world. Let the embers of this story glow in your heart, a reminder that each of us has the power to plant seeds of greatness, to nurture ideas that may one day change the world. And as the night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, remember the greatest journeys often lead us home to the truth that lay within us all along. Far beneath the scorching winds of the Sahara, beneath the shifting sands and blistered rock, once lay an ancient kingdom few have heard of, a place of silence and shadow, where the people never touched the Nile, yet built cities in the sand. This was the land of Mali, a forgotten empire that tamed the desert, not by fleeing it, but by learning its secrets. Let's pause here for a moment. The stars overhead blink quietly, and the wind hums low across the dunes. Long before European ships sailed the Atlantic, long before the Ottomans claimed North Africa, the Empire of Mali ruled the Western Sahel. This was the 13th century, when Europe still struggled through the Dark Ages, and the Mongols swept across Asia. The Malians didn't write extensive histories, but they left gold and mosques and tales that echoed through time. Archaeologists digging near the ancient city of Niani, their capital, have uncovered the remnants of a vast trading network. Some routes stretching across the Sahara, others leading deep into the continent's heart. A people surrounded by harsh terrain, but determined to thrive. They didn't fear the desert. They mastered it. Let's pause here. Dust settles where empires once stood. The Malians' greatest achievement lay in their ability to connect. They built trade routes, an ingenious network of caravans and way stations that linked the gold-rich south to the salt-laden north, carrying wealth and knowledge across vast stretches of seemingly impassable terrain, without compasses, without maps, just stars, camels, and courage. Each route was maintained by generations, traders passing down knowledge of hidden away dangerous passes, and the rhythms of the desert itself. It was a world of extreme heat and bitter cold, of blinding sandstorms and nights so dark the stars seemed to shout. A world away from the lush banks of the Niger River, and through this harsh, unforgiving expanse, they built an empire. Hundreds of thousands lived off this intricate web of trade. as though the desert itself whispered its secrets to them. Let's pause again. In the vastness of the Sahara, even time feels different. From Niani, their capital, the Malian rulers commanded an empire stretching from the Atlantic coast deep into the Sahara and south to the forests. They traded with the Berbers and Arabs. They exchanged gold for salt, textiles, and books, and they were known as patrons of learning, building libraries and mosques, attracting scholars from across the Muslim world. Arab writers called them the Land of Gold, but it was their organizational skill that truly set them apart. One Arab record mentions the famous pilgrimage of Mansa, a Malian emperor whose procession to Mecca was so lavish it devalued the price of gold in Egypt for years. Yet their cities were not just of wealth, but of wisdom. Universities, courts of law, diplomatic centers, their influence still echoes today. In language, in culture, in the very shape of West African nations. Let's pause once more. Even faded glory casts a long shadow. But the gold was not infinite. Over centuries, the mines began to produce less. New trade routes opened by sea, bypassing the Sahara entirely. The desert, always patient, began to reclaim its conquered territories. Caravans dwindled. Way stations were abandoned, and one by one, the cities of Mali became shadows of their former selves. By the time European explorers penetrated the interior in the 19th century, they found only scattered kingdoms. No empire, no vast wealth, only the whispers of what had been, but the memory remained. Buried in sand, etched in stone, retold now, here, beneath this quiet sky. Let's pause here for a moment. Empires fall not always with a clash of arms, but with the slow shifting of trade winds. Yet the legacy of Mali lives on, in the intricate patterns of cloth woven in markets from Timbuktu to Dakar, keepers of history whose words bridge centuries. In the mosques of Jen and Timbuktu, their mud brick walls still standing against time and sand, the empire may have faded, but its echoes resound in the music that pulses through West African nights, rhythms that traveled across oceans to birth new forms. In the tales of Sundiata, the legendary founder, still whispered around fires and taught in schools, in the very borders of modern nations, shaped by the reach of an ancient realm. Let's pause. History is not just in books, but in the very air we breathe. The Sahel today faces challenges both old and new. Drought creeps ever southward, pushing at the edges of farmland. Political instability shakes regions once united under imperial banners. Yet the spirit of Mali, of adaptation, of connection, of finding life in harsh places, endures. New trade routes form, not of camel caravans, but of bits and bytes. Ancient manuscripts are digitized, their wisdom spreading farther than their authors could have dreamed. And in remote villages and bustling cities alike, people look to their past to find strength for the future. Let's pause one final time. The wheel of history turns, but some spokes remain constant. As night deepens over the Sahara, as it has for millennia, we reflect on empires risen from dust and returned to it, on the resilience of human spirit in the face of nature's harshest tests, on the connections that bind us across deserts, across oceans, across time itself. The empire of Mali may be gone, but its lessons remain, of finding abundance in scarcity, of building bridges where others see only barriers, of the power of knowledge to illuminate even the darkest night. As we leave this journey through time and sand, remember, greatness can bloom in the most unlikely places. Empires may crumble, but the human spirit endures, and sometimes the most precious treasures are the ones carried in our hearts and minds. Now let us drift deeper into stories left behind, not in ink, but in silence and soil. For the ancient Malians were not only traders and builders, they were also weavers of legends. And their myths cling to the edges of our knowledge like distant mirages. The Sahel keeps secrets, but sometimes it whispers. Let's pause here for a moment. The moon casts long shadows on the savannah. A hyena laughs far off. Voices without names unlike the Egyptians or Nubians. The ancient Malians left no great papyri or stone tablets. They wrote little down. Instead, they spoke, and remembered. Their culture was carried in the careful cadence of griots, in intricate gold jewelry, in ritual alignments with the stars. In one burial mound, archaeologists found the remains of a woman adorned with delicate gold earrings. Her hands placed gently over her chest, a blackened calabash beside her head filled with dried kola nut centuries preserved by the dry earth. We do not know her name. We do not know her songs. But she was someone honored, perhaps remembered. The ancient Malians didn't need parchment to preserve meaning. They had gold, music, and memory. Let's pause here. A breeze moves across the grass, like a whisper passing through an invisible crowd. Desert spirits and sky maps among the ruins of Gano. Some walls align perfectly with the sun, and in their sacred grounds, tiny stones form patterns matching the constellation Orion. Though we have no hymns, their architecture sings. Local Dogon legends speak of those who descended from the stars, and of shining beings with golden skin who rode on celestial boats. Some believe the ancient Malians had spiritual guardians, creatures of wind and water, appeased with offerings and chants whispered at dawn. We cannot know where myth ends and memory begins, but in the Sahel, both are equally sacred. Let's pause again. The fire crackles softly, and a shooting star dances quietly across the night sky. Skeletons in motion. In 2015, satellite images revealed something strange. North of Timbuktu, under layers of untouched sand, rows of dark shapes formed geometric patterns. They were ancient burial mounds, dozens of them in circular, rectangular, and crescent shapes. Beneath the sand, whole necropolises had been lost to time. Excavations found bodies buried with gold ornaments, others lying flat with iron spearheads beside their hands. Warriors, merchants, grits. Some skulls showed signs of ritual scarification, a mark of beauty or status. Others bore grooves, marks of disease, signs of tooth filing or cranial deformation. From these bones, a story emerges. A diverse people with rituals and rank, beauty standards and burial codes, and a deep belief in life beyond this one. The ancient Malians walked their dead into the afterlife with dignity. Even if we cannot read their language, we feel their humanity. Let's pause here. The hush returns. The ancestors settle in beside us. Echoes in the dust, not far from the ruins of Kaumbi Saleh. Modern Fulani herders still lead cattle across age-old paths. Sometimes their herds stray over cracked foundations. Children play among fallen stones, unaware their feet tread over bones of kings and scholars. The desert doesn't announce what it remembers. It simply holds on. And now, so do we. As science deciphers satellite images and digs a little deeper each year, the ancient Malian kingdoms are being pieced together, slowly, tenderly, like a forgotten epic being sung back into the wind. Let's pause again. The sky darkens into indigo. The earth cools to night's embrace. Mansa Musa, the Golden King. In the tapestry of Mali's history, one thread shines brighter than all others. Mansa Musa, the king whose pilgrimage to Mecca became legend. Picture this. A caravan stretching beyond the horizon, camels laden with gold, thousands of servants and soldiers in gleaming armor at its heart. A man whose generosity would reshape economies and whose piety would inspire generations. Mansa Musa's journey was more than a display of wealth. It was a bridge between worlds, a testament to Mali's greatness and a seed of myth that would grow for centuries. Let's pause here. The air shimmers with the memory of gold dust carried on desert winds. In Cairo, they say, Mansa Musa's largesse caused a decade of inflation. In Mecca, his humility before Allah moved the hardest hearts. And in Timbuktu, the city he would transform into a center of learning. His legacy still whispers through narrow streets and ancient libraries. But who was the man behind the myth? We know he was a scholar, versed in mathematics and astronomy. We know he was a builder, erecting mosques that stand to this day. And we know he was a visionary, seeing in Mali not just an empire of gold, but a beacon of knowledge. Yet for all his documented deeds, Mansa Musa remains as elusive as a mirage. Did he truly hold half the world's gold? Did his passage really alter the course of history? Or have the sands of time magnified his legend? Let's pause again. The weight of history settles around us like a heavy cloak. The libraries of Timbuktu imagine a city where books were as precious as gold, where scholars traveled months across burning sands just to touch the spines of ancient tomes. This was Timbuktu in its golden age, a repository of wisdom that rivaled Alexandria, and at its heart stood the Sankha Mosque, a university where astronomy, medicine, and philosophy flourished under the desert sun. But time is a fickle guardian of knowledge. Wars came, empires fell, and the libraries of Timbuktu faded into legend. Yet some things refuse to be forgotten. In recent years, teams of dedicated scholars have worked tirelessly to preserve what remains. Fragile manuscripts, some older than the city itself, are carefully ancient formulas for medicine, treatises on ethics, and poems of love and loss are slowly revealing their secrets. Let's pause here. The rustle of old pages mingles with the hum of modern technology. Each restored text is a window into a world we thought lost. A world where African intellectuals debated the nature of the cosmos, where mathematicians calculated the movements of stars, and where poets wove words as intricate as any golden thread. The libraries of Timbuktu remind us that history is not a single story, but a chorus of voices. Some loud, some whispered, all vital. As we uncover these voices, we rewrite not just Mali's history, but the history of human knowledge itself. Let's pause again. The weight of centuries of wisdom settles around us like a comforting blanket. The living legacy walk the streets of modern Bamako, and you'll find echoes of ancient Mali everywhere. In the rhythms of the kora, in the patterns of Bogolon cloth, in the words of griots who still keep oral histories alive. The empire may have faded, but its spirit endures. In marketplaces, traders still use techniques perfected centuries ago. In fields, farmers follow the cycles of the Niger as their ancestors did. And in schools, children learn of Sundiata Keita and Mansa Musa, alongside tales of more recent heroes. Mali's past is not a dusty relic. It's a living, breathing thing that shapes the present and reaches toward the future. Let's pause here. The air vibrates with the energy of a culture that refuses to be forgotten. As archaeologists unearth new discoveries and historians reinterpret old texts, our understanding of ancient Mali grows richer and more complex. We see not just a golden empire, but a tapestry of cultures, a crucible of ideas, a testament to human ingenuity in one of the world's harshest environments. And perhaps, in studying this past, we find keys to our shared future, lessons in resilience, in cultural exchange, in the power of knowledge to transcend borders and time itself. The story of ancient Mali is far from over. It continues to unfold, page by page, artifact by artifact, whisper by whisper. Let's pause one final time. ... The night deepens. The stars wheel overhead, and somewhere, in the vast expanse of the Sahara, the ghosts of empires past keep their silent vigil. Narrator, as we leave this journey through time and sand, remember that history is not just what's written in books. It's in the land beneath our feet, in the stories we tell our children, in the very air we breathe. Mali's legacy lives on, not as a relic, but as a promise. A promise that greatness can rise from the most unlikely places, that knowledge is the truest gold, and that the human spirit, like the mighty Niger, will always find a way to flow on. Now we come to the final layer of Mansa Musa's empire. Not its gold, nor its mosques, but its heartbeat. Not long ago, a group of children in Mali barefoot and Sunderkond played in the shadow of ancient walls. The dust rose around their feet. What they did not know is that they were dancing on the echoes of a forgotten world. Let's pause here for a moment. The wind whispers, and the past leans in to listen. The gold beneath Sahel seems barren, but underneath, riches still flow. Centuries ago, the Mali Empire carved trade routes, a network of caravans and river ports, salt-laden and gold, to tap deep into the continent's wealth and bring prosperity to their savannah kingdom. Each journey was a silent miracle. Men would traverse scorching sands with camels and boats, their work arduous, perilous, ... sometimes deadly, but when they returned, there would be gold, enough to build grand mosques, enough to fund scholars, enough to change the world. Some trade routes stretched for thousands of miles, and their stop seen from above look like a string of oases across the landscape, punctuating the desert like a forgotten constellation. Let's pause here. A glimmer echoes in the mind. Gold ... In the heart of Africa, wisdom above while wealth flowed below. Above, the Mali Empire forged knowledge in the halls of libraries, madrasas, and marketplaces tell of a people skilled in astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. They weren't primitive, they were profound. Their scholars created texts on medicine and treatises on governance. Some manuscripts had inscriptions in Arabic and local scripts, words that still resonate today. But wisdom was more than utility. It was also spiritual. In their mosques, prayers were offered, possibly to honor ancestral spirits or mark celestial events. We may never know their full meanings. Let's pause again. The air carries the faint scent of ink and parchment. The reign of Mansa Musa. All empires eventually change. Even in the savannah, time is not still. By the 14th century CE, Mansa Musa, Mali Empire's most famous ruler, began his legendary pilgrimage. The gold flowed, trade routes expanded. Cultural exchange with the Islamic world reached new heights. Climate played a part. The soul's delicate balance sustained an empire. Rivers nurtured fields of millet and sorghum. Some of Mali's influence spread across the continent. Others became the stuff of legend. Their wealth and wisdom whispered in tales. Only fragments remained. A few coins, a broken pottery shard, a name etched in the annals of history. Let's pause here. The silence becomes a tapestry. A legacy drifts into memory. The echoes we carry yet, perhaps they are not gone. Every time a griot sings of ancient kings, every time archaeologists unearth a manuscript or a gold weight, the Mali Empire lives again. We carry them in our questions, in the careful preservation of texts, in the whispers beneath the sand. They were traders, astronomers, poets, farmers, visionaries, and though time took their empire, it also preserved their legacy. Their story, like all great stories, does not end. It evolves into song and scripture, into gold and glory. Let's pause one last time. The empires fade, but the wisdom remains. Narrator, now we turn to the realm of Songhai, not its warriors, nor its cities, but its spirit. Not long ago, a fisherman on the Niger River, weathered and proud, cast his net into the flowing waters. The current swirled around his boat. What he did not know is that he was harvesting from the veins of a forgotten empire. Let's pause here for a moment. The river murmurs, and the past ripples to the surface. The waters that sustained Sahel seems harsh, but along its rivers, life still thrives. Centuries ago, the Songhai Empire mastered the Niger, a network of ports and fishing villages, reed boats and riverside farms to harness the lifeblood of their vast domain. Each bend in the river was a silent miracle. Men would navigate treacherous rapids with skill and courage, their work demanding, vital, sometimes perilous, but when they docked, there would be abundance. Enough to feed cities, enough to fuel trade, enough to build an empire. Some river routes stretched for hundreds of leagues, and their ports seen from above looked like pearls strung along the Niger's course, punctuating the landscape like a forgotten necklace. Let's pause here. A splash echoes in the mind, the pulse of an empire. Knowledge above wild fish and crops sustained the body. Above, the Songhai Empire nourished the mind in the academies of Timbuktu and Gao. Scholars, libraries, and centers of learning tell of a people devoted to knowledge and spiritual growth. They weren't isolated, they were interconnected. Their intellectuals created works on astronomy and commentaries on sacred texts. Some treatises explored mathematics and medicine ideas that bridged continents and centuries. But learning was more than academic, it was also transformative. In their universities, students from across Africa and beyond gathered, possibly to unlock the secrets of the cosmos or plumb the depths of faith. We may never know the full extent of their discoveries. Let's pause again. The breeze carries the faint rustle of turning pages. The reign of Askia Muhammad, all powers eventually shift. Even by the great river, time is not still. By the late 15th century CE, Askia Muhammad, the Songhai Empire's most renowned ruler, began his campaign of expansion and reform. The empire grew, trade flourished, Islamic scholarship reached new heights of sophistication. Geography played a part. The Niger's annual floods sustained an agricultural bounty. Deserts to the north protected while allowing measured contact with the wider world. Some of Songhai's innovations spread across West Africa. Others became the seeds of future renaissance. Their methods and ideas preserved in manuscripts. Only echoes remained, a few stone foundations, a broken pottery shard, a name revered in oral traditions. Let's pause here. The silence becomes a river. An empire flows into memory. The legacy we inherit, yet perhaps they are not gone. Every time a scholar references an ancient text from Timbuktu, every time archaeologists unearth evidence of vast trading networks, the Songhai Empire breathes anew. We carry them in our questions, in the careful restoration of manuscripts, in the currents beneath the surface. They were navigators, philosophers, warriors, farmers, dreamers, and though conquest took their empire, it could not erase their contributions. Their story, like all enduring stories, does not end, it transforms into ink and inspiration, into trade and tradition. Let's pause one last time. The empires may fall, but the river of knowledge flows on. Narrator. And so we come to the twilight of ancient West Africa. Not its decline, nor its conquest, but its eternal flame. Not long ago, a storyteller in a village square was rich with history-wove tales of longer kings and forgotten cities. The firelight danced on eager faces. What the listeners did not fully grasp is that they were the living embodiment of those ancient dreams. Let's pause here for a moment. The embers glow, and the past speaks through the flames. The threads that bind West Africa seems fractured by modern borders but beneath. Connections still pulse. Centuries of empires wove a tapestry, a network of shared cultures and traditions, rites and ceremonies, to preserve the wisdom of ages and the unity of peoples. Each story passed down was a silent miracle. Elders would commit vast epics to memory, their work sacred, vital, sometimes misunderstood. But when they spoke, there was continuity, enough to remember heroes, enough to teach values, enough to forge identity. Some oral traditions stretched across generations, and their theme as seen from afar look like constellations of human experience, punctuating time like a forgotten map of the soul. Let's pause here. A whisper echoes in the mind. Stories, the DNA of civilization. As the fire dies down and the stars wheel overhead, remember this. The empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai may have faded into the sands of time, but their legacy lives on in every child who learns their history, in every scholar who uncovers their wisdom, in every dreamer who imagines what once was and what might yet be. For in the end, it is not the gold that endures, nor the conquests, nor even the grand monuments. It is the human, spirit resilient, creative, ever-seeking that carries the torch of these ancient kingdoms into the future. Let us pause one final time. The night deepens, but the dawn of understanding is ever on the horizon. Let us leave the sands of the vanished Garamantis now, and journey westward, across wind-swept dunes and sun-burnt plains, until we arrive at the edge of a city that gleams not with stone or silver, but with knowledge. Timbuktu, a name that echoes like a riddle. Too many today, it means the ends of the earth, a faraway fable. But once, it was the center of a golden world. Let's pause here. A page turned softly, and the dust of books rises into twilight air. The city that learned to breathe, knowledge had embarked, rose where two worlds met, the river world of the Niger and the desert world of the Salt caravans arrived heavy with slabs from Tagad. Gold flowed from the south like honey, and above all, books from Cairo, Fez, even Baghdad rested on the backs of camels and the laps of scribes. By the 14th century, it was not wealth that crowned the city, but learning. Mosques lined the streets Gingaber, and Sidi Yayayij were not only a place of prayer, but of poetry, astronomy, law, and debate. Inside their mud walls, students gathered around imams, knees folded on woven mats, quills in hand, writing on tablets of wood and parchment. Let's pause here. A breeze whispers through open windows, carrying the scent of ink and palm leaves, salt, gold, and gentle authority. Daily life in Timbuktu was layered a balance of trade, teaching, and devotion. Merchants set up stalls in the early light, their wares carefully arranged, beads from the east, scrolls from Andalusia, amber leather, and fine fabrics from Kano. But gold remained the lifeblood. It came from the Bambouk and Bure mines, and passed through Timbuktu's hands like sunlight through water. A golden dinar could buy a home or fund a scholar's journey across the Mediterranean. And yet, this prosperity did not erase humility. Judges known as Qadis were respected not for their riches, but for the wisdom in their rulings. Teachers earned more in reputation than coin, and a greeting carried more weight than a gemstone. Let's pause again. Footsteps echo on dusty stone. Soft voices trail into the call to prayer. The unwritten rules of greatness. Timbuktu had its codes, silent, sacred ones. Knowledge was meant to be shared, but not shouted. Books were copied by hand with care, their covers bound in soft leather, their margins annotated with reverence. A library wasn't simply a storage room, it was a living being. At night, lamplight flickered in the scriptoria, and the rhythm of pen scraping parchment was like soft rain on sand. Some scholars believed certain books had spirits baroque, a kind of sacred energy that protected the city from ruin. And so, during festivals or droughts, pages were recited aloud, like prayer, as though ink could call down the rain. Let's pause here for a moment. The moon rises over the minaret, and all is hushed. The paradox of Timbuktu, it was a city of paradox. In its dry earth lay the richest thoughts. In its silence lived the loudest minds. They were built from clay and palmwood. It stood taller than stone citadels because it nurtured ideas, but even in its prime, Timbuktu was aware of its fragility. Sand blew in through every crack. Mice nibbled at the edges of precious texts. And time, always creeping, eventually takes everything, but not tonight. Tonight, Timbuktu lives again. Its scholars breathe through these words. Its wisdom lights your dreams. Let's pause here once more. A fire crackles faintly. The scroll is gently closed. In the heart of West Africa, where the Sahara's golden sands meet the life-giving waters of the Niger, Timbuktu stood as a beacon of knowledge and culture. Its story is one of transformation from a humble desert outposto, a glittering center of Islamic learning and trade. As we delve deeper into Timbuktu's golden age, we find a tapestry woven with threads of scholarship, commerce, and faith. The city's rise to prominence began in the 13th century, but it was under the reign of Mansa Musa, the legendary king of Mali, that Timbuktu truly blossomed. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 brought unprecedented wealth and attention to his empire. His journey, laden with gold and accompanied by thousands, left an indelible mark on the imagination of the world. Upon his return, Mansa Musa brought with him scholars, architects, and artisans from across the Islamic world. They would help transform Timbuktu into a city that rivaled the great centers of learning in North Africa and the Middle East. Let us pause. The sound of chisels on stone mingles with the murmur of scholars in debate. The great mosques, under Mansa Musa's patronage, the Jingaba Mosque rose from the earth. Its distinctive minaret, piercing the sky like a finger pointing to heaven, built of mud brick and wood, it stood as a testament to the ingenuity of Sudano-Sahelian architecture, adapting to the harsh desert climate while creating spaces of sublime beauty. The mosque, already ancient by Mansa Musa's time, was expanded and elevated to the status of a university. Within its cool, shaded courtyards, scholars from across Africa and the Middle East gathered to share knowledge, and the Sidi Yahya Mosque, completed in the mid-50s, rounded out the trio of great houses of worship and learning. These mosques were more than mere buildings. They were the beating heart of Timbuktu's intellectual life. Let's pause again. The rustle of robes and the scratch of pens on parchment fill the air. The university at its height. The university of the great centers of learning in Cairo, Fez, and Cordoba. Students came from all corners of the Islamic world to study, but the curriculum extended far beyond religious studies. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and history were pursued with equal vigor. The university's library held over 700,000 manuscripts, a treasure trove of knowledge in a world where books were worth their weight in gold. The scholars of Timbuktu developed a unique intellectual tradition, blending Islamic learning with African wisdom and experience. They wrote extensively on subjects ranging from ethics to ethnography, creating a corpus of work that would influence thinkers for centuries to come. Let us pause. The whisper of turning pages mingles with the distant call of the moon. The golden age of trade while learning flourished within the city's walls. Timbuktu's position as a trading hub ensured its prosperity. Caravans arrived from the north, bearing salt from the Sahara's mines. This white gold was as precious as the metal itself, essential for preserving food and maintaining health in the tropical climate. From the south came gold dust and nuggets, mined in the forests of Guinea and carried along the Niger River. Timbuktu's merchants acted as middlemen, exchanging salt for gold and reaping enormous profits. But it wasn't just gold and salt that passed through Timbuktu's markets. Ivory, slaves, and cola nuts from the south met textiles, horses, and manufactured goods from the north. The city became a melting pot of cultures, where Tuareg nomads rubbed shoulders with Mandinka traders and Arab scholars, conversed with Songhai River merchants. Let's pause here. The buzz of the marketplace fades as the sun dips below the horizon. The scribes of Timbuktu in the quiet corners of the city. Away from the bustle of the markets and the debates of the mosques, Timbuktu's scribes worked tirelessly. These men and sometimes women were the guardians of knowledge, copying texts by hand with meticulous care. Their work preserved and spread the wisdom of the ages, ensuring that the insights of scholars would not be lost to time. The scribes developed their own styles of calligraphy, beautiful and distinct from those of the Arab world. They crafted inks from the soot of acacia wood and bound their books in soft leather tooled with intricate designs. Each manuscript was a work of art, as well as a vessel of knowledge. The scribes believed that the act of copying a text was itself a form of worship, a way of preserving and honoring divine wisdom. Let us pause once more. The scratch of quills on parchment fades into the night. The legacy of Timbuktu. As we draw our journey through Timbuktu's golden age to a close, we are left with a sense of wonder at what was achieved in this remote desert city. For centuries, Timbuktu stood as a beacon of learning and culture, a place where knowledge was revered above all else. Its scholars produced works that would influence thinkers across Africa and the Islamic world. But like all golden ages, Timbuktu's time of glory was finite. The rise of sea trade routes diminished its importance as a commercial center. Political instability and conquest brought hardship and decline. Yet the spirit of Timbuktu, its thirst for knowledge, its reverence for the written word, its blend of cultures and ideas. In recent years, efforts to preserve and digitize Timbuktu's remaining manuscripts have brought renewed attention to this remarkable chapter in human history. As we close our tale, let us remember that the true gold of Timbuktu was not the metal that flowed through its markets, but the wisdom that flourished in its schools and libraries. Let's pause here one final time. The night deepens, and the stars above Timbuktu shine like scattered gold dust. In the silence, we can almost hear the whispers of scholars long gone, their words echoing across the centuries, reminding us of the enduring power of knowledge and the remarkable achievements of the human spirit. In the cool, shaded chambers of ancient Mali's private libraries, there were books that could not be read aloud. Books hidden not because they were dangerous, but because they were sacred. Fragile containers of ancient wisdom, guarded not by lock and key, but by silence, respect, and lineage. These were the forbidden books of Mansa Musa's empire, scrolls written in cryptic cursive, preserved behind closed doors and beneath floorboards, and those entrusted with their keeping scribes, sons, students, knew that some knowledge was too heavy to carry by tongue. Let's pause here for a moment. The wind shifts outside, stirring the dust of the past. What could not be? Some books dealt in dreams, others with the stars, a few with formulas not for wealth or power, but for balance between the physical and spiritual realms. Among the most closely guarded were books of astronomy and healing. They mapped the stars in correlation to dates of birth, prescribed herbs and prayers, and warned of eclipses believed by some to be omens of great change in the empire. Then there were manuscripts on numerical mysticism pages that arranged letters and numbers in geometric grids. They were said to hold predictive power, but only if read by those trained to see beyond the ink. Many of these texts arrived from distant lands, carried along the trade routes, while others were composed right in the heart of Mali, penned by thinkers who sat beneath baobab trees, listening to the rhythms of wind, birds, and silence. Let's rest a while here. A candle gutters in the corner, casting shadows like script upon the wall. The role of the scribatobi, a scribe in Mansa Musa's court, was not merely to copy, but to commune, to lean over parchment with slow, meditative breath, to mix ink by hand from soot, water, and gum, Arabic, and to view each letter as an offering to the great empire. Some scribes wrote only after ritual washing. Others whispered prayers before each page. A few wore charms on their writing hands, woven from hair and leather to protect the sacred process from envy or error. Mistakes were not scratched out, but humbly noted in the margins. May Allah forgive my trembling hand. And each completed manuscript was not owned, but entrusted a legacy to be passed on through generations of Mali's scholars. Let's pause again. A bell rings far off in the market, barely audible from the chamber's hush. Manuscripts as living spirits over time. Certain books gained reputations, not for their titles or authors, but for the events said to follow those who read them carelessly. There was a belief soft, unspoken, that books could remember. One manuscript, said to be filled with spiritual diagrams, was only opened during times of drought. It was wrapped in 3 layers of cloth and never stored with others, as though it might whisper its contents in the dark. In the home of a respected scholar in Timbuktu, a collection of rare treatises was kept in a wooden box, alongside a bottle of water from the Niger River and a date stone from Mecca. The box was never moved, and the room around it was always swept by hand. Let's pause here for a while. The room stills. You can almost hear the flutter of unseen pages. The silence that protected an empire in a world where empires rose and fell. Mali survived through quiet preservation. When invaders came, rival kingdoms and later colonial explorers, many books vanished, but some were saved. Scholars buried them in clay jars, hid them in walls, or sent them to distant cousins. The knowledge lived, and not because of defiance, but because of discretion. Even now, beneath the floorboards of simple homes, beneath tea kettles and dusty rugs, manuscripts sleep, waiting for hands gentle enough to lift them, and eyes wise enough to read slowly. Let's pause one last time. The fire burns low, casting long shadows on the sand. In the golden age of Mali, under the reign of Mansa Musa, knowledge was power, but it was a power wielded with great care and reverence. The empire's strength lay not just in its gold, but in its wisdom preserved in silence and secrecy. The libraries of Timbuktu, Gao, and Jen held more than just words on parchment. They held the heartbeat of a civilization. Each book, a testament to the empire's intellectual wealth. Each scribe, a guardian of Mali's legacy. Let's take a moment to breathe in the scent of aged leather and ink. The forbidden knowledgesome books spoke of the stars and their influence on earthly affairs. These astronomical texts were closely guarded, for they were believed to hold the key to predicting the empire's future. Only the most trusted advisors to Mansa Musa were allowed to consult them. Other manuscripts contained alchemical formulas not for turning lead into gold, but for transforming the soul. These spiritual texts were considered too potent for the uninitiated. They were kept under lock and key, their contents whispered only in hushed tones. There were books of medicine that blended physical remedies with spiritual incantations. These healing texts were passed down through families of healers. Their knowledge, a sacred trust. Let's pause here. The rustle of turning pages echoes through time. The scribe's sacred dutito, be chosen as a scribe in Mali, was to be entrusted with the empire's soul. These were not mere copyists, but keepers of flame. Each stroke of the pen was an act of devotion. Each completed manuscript a bridge between past and future. Some scribes fasted before beginning their work, others meditated in the cool pre-dawn hours, aligning their spirits with the task ahead. The act of writing was seen as a form of prayer, a communion with the divine through the medium of ink and parchment. Mistakes were rare, but when they occurred, they were treated with humility and reverence. A dropped letter might be circled and annotated. This imperfection is mine alone, not the wisdom it carries. The completion of a manuscript was cause for celebration, but also for solemn reflection. For in finishing one book, the scribe took on the responsibility of beginning another, ensuring the unbroken chain of knowledge. Let's take a moment to honor their dedication. The scratch of a quill on parchment whispers across centuries. The living librarian Mali. Books were more than objects. They were living entities, imbued with spirit and power. Some were said to tremble when opened by unworthy hands. Others were rumored to glow faintly in the presence of true seekers of wisdom. One famous text, a compendium of West African oral traditions, was said to sing softly when the wind blew from the east. It was kept in a special room, where only the sound of the Niger River could be heard. Another manuscript, containing the secret history of the empire, was divided into 7 parts. Each part was entrusted to a different family, to be reunited only in times of great need or celebration. Let's pause to listen. Can you hear the whispers of ancient wisdom on the wind? The silent guardiances, Mali's influence waxed and waned as empires rose and fell around it. The keepers of knowledge adapted. They developed intricate systems of hiding and preserving their precious texts. Some books were sealed in leather pouches and buried in the desert, their locations marked only by the positions of the stars. Others were hidden in plain sight, disguised as common household objects or children's toys. During times of unrest, networks of scholars would memorize entire texts, becoming living books themselves. They would travel in disguise, carrying Mali's wisdom in their hearts and minds. Even as the empire faded, its knowledge endured, passed down through generations, whispered in the quiet corners of new kingdoms, preserved in the DNA of West African culture. Let's take a final moment of silence, to honor the keepers of secrets, the guardians of wisdom. And so, the legacy of Mali's forbidden books lives on, in the quiet libraries of Timbuktu, in the oral traditions of griots, in the very fabric of West African society, a testament to the power of knowledge, the sanctity of wisdom, and the enduring strength of a culture that knew the value of silence. As we leave this chamber of secrets, remember, some truths are best spoken softly, some wisdom is best carried lightly. For in the gentle whisper of turning pages, in the hushed tones of scholars, in the reverent silence of ancient libraries, there lies the true gold of empires. By the 1990s, the echoes of Timbuktu's golden age had long since faded into whispers. The once bustling streets, alive with the footsteps of scholars and merchants, now lay quiet under the relentless Saharan sun. Yet, beneath this seeming stillness, a current of resilience flowed, as steady and vital as the Niger River itself. For centuries, the treasures of Timbuktu had slumbered, hidden from the world's gaze, not in grand libraries or ornate palaces, but in the humble dwellings of its people. Manuscripts, fragile as butterfly wings, rested in wooden chests and earthen jars, guarded by the weathered hands of elders and the curious eyes of children. Let us pause here for a moment. Can you hear it? The rustle of ancient pages stirred by the breath of a new generation. We continue. In the heart of Mali, where the desert meets the savannah, Timbuktu stood as a testament to human perseverance. The city that once dazzled the world with its wealth of gold and salt now held a different kind of treasure. Knowledge, preserved in ink and parchment, waited patiently for its moment to re-emerge. The story of Timbuktu's decline is a familiar one in the annals of history. The Moroccan invasion of 1591 had struck a devastating blow, scattering scholars and silencing the great centers of learning, the once vibrant university, where minds from across Africa and beyond had gathered to debate philosophy and astronomy, fell into disrepair. As the centuries passed, Timbuktu faded from the world's consciousness. European maps labeled it a myth, a mirage shimmering on the edge of the known world. Explorers driven by dreams of glory and gold searched in vain, only to find a city that seemed, to their untrained eyes, unremarkable. But they could not see the true wealth of Timbuktu. It lay not in grand buildings or glittering treasures, but in the quiet determination of its people. Generation after generation, families safeguarded their heritage, passing down manuscripts as precious heirlooms. Let us rest here a while. ... Listen closely. You might just catch the whisper of a grandmother, her voice low and urgent. Keep it safe, child. Our time will come again. As the 20th century dawned, bringing with it the upheavals of colonialism and independence, Timbuktu's manuscripts remained hidden. Wrapped in goatskin, sealed in clay pots, they endured, each fragile page a bridge between past and future, waiting for the moment when the world would once again recognize their worth. Then came the 1990s, and with them a new chapter in Timbuktu's long history. Civil unrest gripped Mali, and once again the city's treasures were threatened. But this time something was different. The world had changed, and with it the means to preserve and share knowledge. A new generation of guardians emerged. Young Malian archivists, armed with cameras and computers, took up the mantle of their ancestors. They understood that to save Timbuktu's legacy, they would need to embrace both tradition and technology. Let us pause once more. The air is thick with anticipation. Can you feel it? The past and present converging as ancient wisdom meets modern innovation. What followed was nothing short of heroic. As conflict intensified in northern Mali, these dedicated individuals embarked on a secret mission. Manuscripts, some dating back to the 13th century, were carefully packed into ordinary containers. Rice sacks, flour tins, anything that wouldn't draw attention. By car, by donkey, even by boat, they moved thousands of precious documents. Each journey was fraught with danger, each manuscript a fragile link to a world that had almost been lost. Sometimes the paper would crumble at the touch, decades of history dissolving in an instant. In those moments, the weight of responsibility was almost unbearable. But they persevered. For every manuscript lost, dozens more were saved, digitized, catalogued, and shared with the world. The knowledge that had been whispered in secret for centuries now spoke loudly across continents, proclaiming, "We are still here. Timbuktu lives." Let us take a moment to breathe. The night is deep, the stars brilliant overhead. In the distance, a lone drum beats, a rhythm as old as the city itself. Today, Timbuktu stands at a crossroads. The scars of recent conflicts are still visible, but so too are signs of renewal. Libraries, once ravaged by flames, are being rebuilt. Digital archives in cities, from Bamako to New York, ensure that even if disaster strikes again, the wisdom of Timbuktu will endure. Yet the true heart of Timbuktu's renaissance beats not in institutions, but in its people. In the narrow, winding streets, Children still play among adobe buildings that have stood for centuries. At night, families gather to share stories passed down through generations. These are not mere tales, but living history preserved in memory when paper and ink were too dangerous to possess. The rebirth of Timbuktu is a quiet one. It happens in moments, easily overlooked. A student poring over a newly translated text, an elder teaching traditional calligraphy to wide-eyed, a researcher halfway across the world making a breakthrough thanks to a digitized manuscript. This is how knowledge spreads, not in grand gestures, but in countless small acts of preservation and sharing. Each one a tribute to those who came before, each one a promise to those who will follow. Let us pause here, gently, ... The fire has burned low, its embers glowing softly in the dark. The night is complete, but dawn is not far off. As we look to the future, Timbuktu reminds us of an essential truth. Civilizations may rise and fall, empires may crumble, but knowledge, once kindled, is not easily extinguished. It may hide for a time, smoldering beneath the ashes of conquest and neglect, but given the chance, it will flare to life once more. The story of Timbuktu is far from over. It is being written anew, not just in the city itself, but wherever its legacy touches, in universities and museums, in the hands of scholars and artists inspired by its example. The spirit of Timbuktu lives on. And so, as we end our journey through time, let us remember, Timbuktu is more than a place on a map. It is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity, creativity, and resilience. A reminder that even in the darkest times, hope and wisdom can survive, passed from hand to hand, whispered from one generation to the next. The sun is rising now over the Sahara. Another day begins in Timbuktu, in homes and schools, in libraries old and new. The work of preservation and discovery continues. And with each passing moment, the hidden words of centuries past find new voices, new listeners, new meaning. Not a city lost to time, but a living, breathing testament to the indomitable spirit of human knowledge. A beacon of hope, shining across the sands of the Sahara, inviting us all to listen, to learn, and to remember. So now we return, not with gold, not with salt, not even with words, but with something softer, a sense of stillness, a quiet understanding of the lives that came before. Across this long, slow night, we wandered through the ancient kingdoms of Africa. We felt the weight of history in the crumbling walls of Axum, where mighty obelisks once pierced the sky. We traced the footsteps of forgotten pharaohs along the Nile, their names now whispered only by the wind. Let's pause here for a moment. The air grows still, and we rest beneath the stars. We journeyed across the vast savannas of the Serengeti, with the rumble of distant thunder in our ears and a scent of rain-soaked earth in our nostrils. Herds of wildebeest thundered past, their migration a dance as old as time itself. And yet, those who walked these lands gave birth to civilizations. Let's breathe here slowly. The grasslands sway. The night air hums with life unseen. We sat in the shadow of ancient walls, in cities once bustling with trade, where gold and ivory flowed like rivers. We listened as the names of great leaders echoed through centuries. Sundiata Keita, Queen Nzinga, the visionaries who shaped empires. And in their stories, we found something familiar. Not the language, not the time, but the courage to dream, to build, to leave a mark upon the world that would outlast bone and breath. Let's pause one last time, not to look back, but to feel. Tonight, if you are still with us, eyes heavy, mind softened perhaps, this journey has done what it came to do. Not to wake you, but to carry you into a deeper kind of sleep. One cradled in the wisdom of ages, one wrapped in the silence of forgotten greatness. Like the hush of the Kalahari at midnight, like the whisper of the wind through the ruins of great Zimbabwe, like the soft lapping of waves against the shores of Lake Victoria, where empires rose and fell, where stories wait, and time is patient, and sleep, at last, arrives. Good night,